2 impeachments ending in acquittal and 1 insurrection later, our guest Congressman Adam Schiff writes he's learned that getting to the truth still matters, writing, quote, "In the crucible of Congress, I watched the Trump presidency reveal the degree to which some of my colleagues valued nothing so much as their own position and power. But it also introduced me and the country to William Taylor, who chose the infantry in Vietnam and never stopped serving, and Alexander Vindman, who braved roadside bombs in Iraq and claims of disloyalty at home, and Fiona Hill, who brought her considerable intellect and talent to a country that her father loved but never got to see, and Marie Yovanovitch, whose parents fled communism and fascism, seeing their courage, their selflessness, and their love of country, and knowing that such wonderful public servants populate all our agencies and departments, and people like them inhabit all of our 50 states, was enough to reassure me that we'll be okay for telling the truth, and that here, right still matters." We're back with Congressman Adam Schiff, author of the new book, Midnight in Washington, and that, of course, a quote from Colonel Vindman. And I've had a chance to interview most of those folks, and I agree with you. They were a gift, and seeing them was reassuring. But the truth was they were run over. I mean, they were run over by the steam train of Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. And I wonder if you feel motivated more by not seeing Trump convicted in either of the 2 impeachments in your work on the Select Committee.
Well, I certainly feel a sense of urgency about the fact that this man could once again become the president of the United States. And seeing what he did already, the way he retaliated against anyone who stood up to him, how he hounded out the members of his own party when they did, how he was able to force out people like Marie Yovanovitch under threat of her life, and people like Colonel Vindman and his twin brother, and so many others. You know, I remember vividly, and I write about this, I'm sure you recall it too, all the faux outrage in the Senate during the trial when I made reference to a CBS story that those who crossed the president might find their heads on pikes. Well, immediately after the trial, there were all kinds of heads on pikes, all kinds of retaliation, and it certainly underscored the need to legislate norms that we thought were inviolate, like the protection of whistleblowers, like the protection of inspector generals. And one of our reform packages also, in addition to the 2 you mentioned, the Protecting Our Democracy Act, is our own broad set of post-Watergate reforms designed to attack those very abuses. And that was also very apparently necessary as a result of the last few years.
Where is that? Is there a head of steam behind that? It seems like everything we learned from Trump and everything we see, I mean, you just said it and you write about it. I'll read you what The Atlantic writes. Many Republicans of the uneasy coalition of Democrats and former Republicans who oppose Trump are frantically focused on the danger of Trump and his GOP allies trying to steal 2022 and 2024. It's not without justification. Many of Trump's henchmen are frantically focused on stealing it. These watchdogs risk missing the graver danger. Trump could win this fair and square.
Well, look, I think we underestimated Donald Trump once too often in 2016 with disastrous consequences for the country. I used to tell a joke during the 2016 election that there was no way he was going to become the Republican nominee because Republicans weren't that crazy and Democrats weren't that lucky. Turns out they were that crazy and we weren't that lucky. So we won't make that mistake again. I do think, though, as time goes by, and it will become increasingly clear as we gain more perspective on the last 4 years, Americans will come to realize what a disastrous presidency Donald Trump's was. How many people needlessly lost their lives during the pandemic because of his narcissism and incompetence, but also how his daily dose of bile and poison in the American body politic turned American against American, and they will not want to go back to that. I think that's going to become increasingly clear over time, but we cannot use that as a reason to be complacent or take anything for granted. We're not through this yet, but I do think what we do now will really determine how quickly we can get through it.
I used to believe that, too, and Bob Woodward, and I've quoted a million times, says the edict that the truth emerges. It always gets out. It was certainly true from my time in government and on the McCain-Palin campaign, but I wonder if you really think that's true. I mean, you've got Facebook that erects, phony echo chambers around phony propaganda spewed out from the most watched commentators on Fox News, and that's just what's public facing. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of information being disseminated that's more opaque and echoed and repeated and amplified by our adversaries. Do you really believe that when Trump is revealed, his base will crumble?
I do. I think it's only a matter of time before the fact that the emperor has no clothes is exposed, and Trump and Trumpism comes crashing in on itself. These kind of fanatical movements like Donald Trump's always end up cratering in on themselves. It's true, though, that one of the real contributors to this whole phenomenon has been the revolution in communication, the fact that there's now this major medium in which lies and anger travel literally with virality. And we haven't figured out how to deal with that yet. We haven't figured out, again, how to be good consumers of information. But we will figure it out. And time is not going to be kind to Donald Trump. It's not going to be kind to any of the enablers and sycophants in the Congress who upheld him during this period. And one of the things that I really can't understand about my colleagues is how do they believe they're going to explain this to their children and grandchildren one day? When they're asked, what did you do when that awful man was running the country? Please tell me you did something to stand up to him. Tell me you didn't go along with him. I don't know how they're going to answer. But I have the same, faith that I heard Mitt Romney express when he gave his verdict in that trial and said that he was a deeply religious man and that he had children and grandchildren to answer to. I feel that keenly. I am very confident history will rebuke Donald Trump and everyone who stood with him. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And we're going to have to work to make sure that we're moving the country forward. We never go back to that kind of a presidency.
I know the January 6th investigation is following the facts, as did the two impeachment trials, but I wonder what your personal theory of the case is. I mean, we know from reporting that Donald Trump sat there and cheered the insurrection and the insurrectionists. He told them he loved them on a video. We know that his aides don't want to come talk to you. They're defying subpoenas and facing a vote of criminal contempt by the end of the week, you just said. And you've got a Republican Party, Steve Scalise, the #3 Republican, who I think has kids and maybe even grandkids, won't acknowledge the outcome of the 2020 election that returned him to Congress and his entire caucus. And if you really think that it was fraudulent, then you should ask every Republican House member to resign. I mean, are you sure that they don't want a naked emperor? I mean, you sure they don't see Trump and the Republicans for who they are and want it anyway? And do you think getting to the end of the investigation, I mean, you had a smoking gun in the first impeachment trial. You had a smoking gun to put on the shelf next to it in the second impeachment trial. You had a smoking gun in the video Donald Trump released on Twitter while the insurrection was going on where he said, "I love you." Could you end up just with another smoking gun on the shelf that has no impact?
No. Look, I think that over time, people have come to see and will increasingly come to see the disaster of Donald Trump and the destruction that he's wrought to this country. Why do Steve Scalise continue to peddle the big lie or refuse to tell the truth about it? Why does Kevin McCarthy do the same thing? Because power has revealed them to be people who don't believe any of the things that they've been saying for years, that don't have the courage of their own supposed convictions. But their time is numbered. Historically, those that they are following are rebuked by history, and they will be too. So I have every confidence that that's going to happen. But again, I think that we need to look not to those that have capitulated. We knew instinctively, I think, before this whole chapter in our national history that courage is contagious, and we found out so it is cowardice. But let's look to the courage. Let's let the courage be contagious. Let's let those four figures you put up on the screen inspire us with their courage. There are lots of good people who are really sticking their neck out right now, people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and others. Let's look to their example. I would like to think that they are the future of the GOP, a GOP that once again becomes a party of ideas and ideology. What we're going through in the United States is not unlike what's gone through in what other countries have gone through around the globe as a result of economic changes and profound instability, as a result of the information revolution. It's been a perfect storm of awful. You add the pandemic to it, an environment in which conspiracies just proliferate. But this storm will pass, and we just got to work hard to make sure it passes soon.